Living Room Logic.
Welcome back to Season 2 of Living Room Logic.
This episode, Andrew and I cover a heavy but important topic. Today, we talk about cancer, why cancers are more varied than you'd think, and how we might live with cancer in the future with the help of science.
Cure your boredom by following or subscribing to us wherever you get your podcasts, and check us out on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at Living Room Logic to join our logical following. This season is supported by FameLab Ireland.
Everyone, welcome back to another episode of Living Room Logic, Season 2, baby. As you can tell, we're really giddy because we're going to talk about quite a sad topic today. I don't know why we're giddy for it. But no, it's actually a really serious topic that we wanted to do for a good while, and we're going to give it our best shot. We're going to talk about cancer today. And, it affects a lot of people, and we'll talk about how it does. But, Andrew, my first question to you is, what actually is cancer?
Cancer, in its most simple terms, is the growth of cells, but in its disease form, it is the uncontrolled growth of cells, where cells will keep dividing and keep growing and keep dividing, so much so that it interrupts bodily processes, it takes up resources from your body, etc., etc. And it's super common. It's a worldwide, human species-wide phenomenon. In any given lifetime, you have a 40% chance of developing a cancer. Yeah. And as a member of the human race, you have a 20% chance of dying of cancer.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and this was in 2020 now from the World Health Organization. So this is something that is all over us as a species. It's all over us. It's all over lots of different species as well. But it's something that I think has touched everybody in one manner or another. It's been in one side of your family. Maybe you've had friends who have it. It's very common. And like I was saying, it goes back a long, long way. This isn't something that's new. People like to say it's more common now, but we have absolutely no idea of knowing if it's more common now. Because the first identifications of cancer goes back as far as Egypt, and they found descriptions of cancer, and actually they found cancers in the mummies.
Oh my God. And
one of the oldest pieces of medical literature is something called the Edwin Smith Papyrus, right? Which is just, it describes 8 cases of breast tumors in ancient Egypt, right? This ancient doctor who wrote this up as an example, as a case study. And these were all treated using a fire drill, which is enough said. You can kind of imagine that this was, now you're talking 2,000-3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago even. Where we actually get the word cancer is actually from the Greeks. And cancer is Latin for crab, but the original name for it was krakenos, which was the Greek for crab, right? And this was because Hippocrates, who's the father of modern medicine, he looked at a tumor and he said it looked like a crab, where it had a round body with finger-like projections into the person's body. So it had a little round body with little legs coming out of it. So they were like, hey, it looks like a crab. I don't know what it is, so we'll just call it what it looks like.
That's really cool.
Right? Yeah, and like this, all of this kind of goes back to these times. Like then we had, in Roman times, is actually they continued studying this, and it's actually where we get the study oncology, which is the study of cancers. And onkos means the study of swelling in Greek. So it's swelling in Greek, oncology, the study of that. And then during the Renaissance, everything went wild in all manners of medicine, art, technology, everything like that. So this was the first time that we had the concept of even having an autopsy. So this was the first time that we were actually looking at why people died. And this was when people started to go, what the hell is showing up in 1 in 5 of these people going on? And this was an Italian anatomist, right, called Giovanni Morgani of Padua or something like that. And And this was like the moment that people really began to start noticing it. Then a Scotsman, actually, John Hunter, was the first that said, right, what if we could find these cancers before it kills them and take it out? And he said that in the 1700s, right? So this was like, he was thinking like he was a good bit ahead of the time. And particularly in breast cancer, because breast cancer was the main cancer in focus for a long, long time, primarily because you could actually feel it. You could test it. You could look at it. And it was something that you could be aware of it. And a century after John Hunter said this was the birth of anesthesia. And this was when they started actually saying, oh, you may have a cancer. They didn't know it was a cancer, but they said this lump might be why you feel sick and it could kill you. Let's take it out, right? So that's crazy. That's a lot of stuff going on. And the speed that this progresses, right? Because then in the 1800s, late 1800s, there was this lad called Rudolf Virchow. And this was the first guy who looked at medicine and was like, and looked at disease and was like, right, this starts at the cellular level. He's the founder of cellular pathology, which is basically saying when illness comes from cells and then expresses itself as symptoms, right? And he was the first person who said, right, when you're removing these tumors, give them to me so I can study the cells and I can actually test the cells and I can actually see, right, did you just remove a benign tumor or did you remove a much worse tumor, perhaps a tumor that if you gave it resources would continue to grow outside of the body and then that would inform the treatment of these women?
Wow.
Yeah, it's nuts, right? And honestly, for a long, long time, this was like the height of it. And you're talking, people really didn't have the best idea. Like, it was all around breast cancer because they didn't have any way of looking at other cancers. Okay. And then cervical cancer kind of came into the mix in the early 1900s where the Pap test was first developed. And honestly, you're talking about this was developed in 1923 and it didn't become commonplace until the 60s.
That's madness.
I know, it's crazy.
So recent.
It was nuts. And all of these different things happened very recently. So there's this huge war against cancer that is such a recent development. Like, you're talking about these surgeries coming in only more recently for extra cancers. You're talking even the mammography to visualize breast cancers only came in 1976.
Wow.
And there's loads of stuff. And like, surgery is such a like raw way of dealing with a cancer that really doesn't get to the cause of it, right? It's a treatment, right? Other kinds of treatments is like radiation therapy, right? Something I think is quite cool about radiation therapy is that when X-rays were discovered, 3 months later, they were being used to diagnose people for cancer. 3 months later. And 3 years later, they were used to treat cancer. So this was all an insanely fast movement, man. Insanely fast. But the reality of how radiation therapy works is like, especially back then, it goes back to our fire drill that the Egyptians used, except it doesn't go through the skin. It just focuses inside of the body. And it's essentially the same thing. It just it cauterizes it. And like, but it's just crazy, all of these different developments, right? Another cool one is, again, back to breast cancer, is in the 1800s, this lad called Thomas Beaton, right? What he did was he took ovaries out of rabbits, right? And he was like, they don't make milk anymore when I take their ovaries out. Maybe this can cure cancer. That was literally the stepping stone. He was like, that was his logic before and then he went, these women have breast cancer. You know what I'm going to do? Take out their ovaries. Literally that step. And you know what? It worked. And this was the first like identification. Yeah, literally, because breast cancer most of the time comes from estrogen, which comes from your ovaries, goes to your breast and stimulates cell growth, right? That's the way it works. So naturally, if it's getting a lot of estrogen, it might become cancerous. If it's continually being told to grow, you take out the ovary, it helps fix the cancer, right? Okay. And again, this isn't the 1800s. These are like the crazy steps going on. And then like the last therapy, which is again like the one of the more common therapies, is chemotherapy, right? And chemotherapy is actually the story behind how we got chemotherapy is that in World War II, soldiers were exposed to so much mustard gas that when they came home, a lot of them weren't developing blood cells and their bone marrow had died.
Jesus.
And again, a leap of logic, then doctors went, this could cure cancer. And they literally turned this mustard gas into something controlled. And we're saying, right, we took out the agent.
Mustard gas.
Mustard gas, literally, yeah. And then they adjusted it and said, right, we found that this mustard gas kills every single cell in the body that is trying to divide. If your cell is trying to divide, this main element of mustard gas will come in and attack it. So therefore, cancer cells, that's all they do. All they want to do is divide. This is the origin of chemotherapy. They will put it in.
That is so interesting.
So what you can kind of see from those is that there's actually not as much development throughout history of our understanding of cancer. And there's not a lot. I didn't mention any cure. I just mentioned treatments. And the treatments are, Aidan, they're very raw or very brutal or very non-specific.
Extremely intrusive, yeah.
And I think
not specific is a great word for it, yeah.
And I think the main question that comes in after it is, we have all these treatments, but yet we still say, where is the cure for cancer? So why don't we have a cure for cancer? Did I lay you up okay there?
Easy question, Andrew.
Yeah?
Easy question, not an easy answer. Because, as you said, our current understanding of cancer needs work, but we've gotten very far. And the treatments are also getting better and better over time, but they are really falling behind as well. And so the lifespan of people suffering with cancer has doubled on average over the past 50 years, which is amazing. But we are unfortunately nowhere near a universal cure for cancer. To be honest, the truth is that cancer isn't really a single disease at all. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, each cancer is extremely unique. So let me explain that. So if you think about what cancer is, and Andrew, you already explained this really well, but basically uncontrolled cell growth and division, starting from a single rogue cell somewhere in your body, right? But we actually now know that there are about 200 different types of cells in the body. So that would make you assume that there can be at least 200 different types of cancer, right? Based on that knowledge. But actually, and Andrew, you'll probably talk about this a bit more, but in the early 2000s, a genetic breakthrough called genome sequencing allowed us to read the entire genetic codebook, it's also called the genome of humans, that every single cell in our body has an identical copy of, and each of our cells uses specific parts of this unique book, right? Depending on where they are in the body and what their function is. And sometimes the genetic code in some of the cells can become damaged, either because of the nature of cell division or because of carcinogens, which I will talk about a little bit later, and then you get a cancer cell. But let's go back to the genome sequencing, because over the past 20 years, scientists went out and sequenced a load of people, both with and without cancer, and all different types of cancers, and they actually sequenced the genomes of different cells in the same cancers, right? To try and see if there was diversity in their genetics, okay? What they found out was pretty crazy, and it was actually pretty unfortunate for us, because they found out that each individual cancer is slightly different genetically. Turns out that even cells within the tumor can vary in their genome. This means that each cancer may have a different response to the same cancer treatment, which makes the effectiveness of these extremely variable, and it's a problem. Okay, so this is why scientists haven't found a universal cure for cancer yet, but knowing this it's kind of crucial to creating specific treatments for different cancers, this knowledge of genetics. So Andrew is going to tell us a little bit about how researchers are tackling the uniqueness of cancers using genetics.
It's actually amazing, the complexity of it all. And I think to really get at how this is happening, right? And to get at how we can target individual cancers is to actually figure out, it sounds like a stupid thing, but why do we not constantly have cancer? Like this isn't the thing that, oh no, because you have billions of cells in your body. The likelihood of one of them dividing and having a mutation that could be cancerous is extremely high. You're talking about billions of cells, okay? The reality is that our immune system is actually constantly going around looking for cells that aren't behaving to actually suppress them and to kill them and be like, no, that's very bold. We don't do that here.
We don't go off on rogue evolutionary journeys.
Yeah.
Of mutation.
Exactly.
No.
We're strictly human here. We're not doing anything
back
fancy.
in line, normal cell.
But what's crazy, right? And something that makes the worst cancers particularly effective is that when these cells are uncontrollably dividing, okay, they're expressing all of their genome or weird parts of their genome, and they're no longer one cell. That you can't recognize them and say, this is a cell X, okay? They can develop all sorts of things, like for some warning for some horrible imagery, but some tumors have been known to develop teeth.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so they will develop different things inside of it because they just uncontrollably open up genetic pathways, right? But what this can do, sickeningly, is this also means that these cancers can sometimes emit anti-inflammatory factors, which say to your immune system, it's fine, I'm good, don't worry about me, I'm doing a perfectly fine thing. And it's doing this by pure fluke. This is just a mutation. It's an accident, right? So this is how, like, normally your immune system would spot it, but for a lot of cancers, they develop these things, and that stops the immune system from putting a close on it, right? So what's the idea of how we approach all of this genetic diversity and all of these different things that could be causing these cancers, right? So what we can do is we can actually take the immune cells out of someone's body with cancer, take out some of their cancer, look at their cancer, and then inform the immune cells and put it back in the body, which is crazy, okay? And this is like a incredibly expensive, incredibly complex thing where basically you're figuring out something about these cells which is nowhere else in the body that you can implant into this immune cell and say, you're looking for this, and when you find it, kill it, right? And this is what it's called CAR T therapy, CAR T cell therapy. And this has been shown to really have a lot of work going for it, and a lot of work going for it really, really well. And it works really effectively. The problem is it's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
It is really labor intensive. You need a lot of experts involved in this. Like, you're talking about teams in the 20s and 30s of people for one case, because you have to go through this immune system and figure out how to design, similar to a vaccine, how to design something on the T cells that you take out of these immune cells
for that specific cancer.
For that specific cancer. And the problem with this is not reproducible. This is person to person. So that's what makes it really complicated. Now, there are some cancers which are common. Okay, so you can have cancers that have common causes, and thankfully, like Aidan said, the life expectancy of people who've developed cancer has improved, and some of that is because we have figured out how to counter these more common cancers.
Yeah.
But the reality, like we've been saying, is that it ain't that easy. It really isn't. Another thing that's coming in, and maybe people will have a good idea of this, is the mRNA vaccines, right? And again, it's a similar idea, but what this does is it saves a step where they don't have to take out your T cells and put them in. What they'll do is they will biopsy the cancer, do the same process of identifying something about this cancer, and then develop a quick vaccine and put it into you. Now, this is a swell idea, vaccine, personal vaccine.
Sounds great.
But how do you do a clinical trial for this?
For this one person's
For
cancer?
this one person. This one individual vaccine that has been personally designed for you. So that's what's slowing down the process of this, because what needs to be done is to foolproof this process of developing individualized vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Because normally, to get a vaccine on the market, you have to test it, as we've seen, in tens of thousands of people so people can take it. But if you're talking about a vaccine for one person's use,
that's incredibly difficult.
It's an incredibly complex thing. The last thing I want to talk about, right, is this thing that came out literally last year. So we're talking 2020, this came out. And
really cool.
These were these super mutant human killer T cells. Remember, I was just talking about the T cells. These crazy things, right?
Mm-hmm.
What these scientists were doing, it's kind of crazy. They were just trying to kill these bacteria, right? And what they did was they put these bacteria that are present in human cells, and probably the most strong cell line you can make in the lab is a cancer cell. But it's a cancer cell line because it refuses to die. That's the whole problem. So they put these bacteria in the cancer cells, and they wanted to see which version of these T cells, these immune cells that they were making, would kill the cancer or kill the bacteria that was going around, but leave the cancer cells alone. And they were doing loads of tests, and then they realized, this one immune cell that we have made is killing everything, just everything, like the whole plate, the bacteria, the cancer cell line, everything, right? And they were like,
yeah,
that's wrong. Surely that's wrong. And but what they did was they were like, right, we have all of this money to study this bacteria. Whoop, out the window. We're not interested in that anymore. We now have this really weird immune cell. And they tested it on breast cancer cell lines. They tested it on colon cancer cell lines, blood cancer cell lines, brain cancer cell lines, all of these different things, right? And the immune cells killed all of them, and left healthy cells alone.
Whoa.
Yeah, so maybe to go back on we're not close to all one big cure for cancer, true, but this is a huge step because it seems to target loads of different kinds of cancers with loads of different kinds of cures.
And from different people.
They studied it in loads of different people and cured their cancers.
Wow.
Right,
okay,
right?
Let's keep looking. Let's keep an eye on that one.
Yeah. So they did a little bit of research on how it does this.
Thank God.
Because they literally just had this immune cell and they were like, it's doing cool things, right? So
putting it in an arena with a bunch of cancer cells and just like, oh, off you go.
Literally like Gladiator. And then leaving the fans alone, of course, leaving the audience out of it, leaving healthy cells alone. Mm-hmm. So what this immune cell is apparently doing, right, is that it has a receptor on its surface called MR1. Think of this as like the bouncer protein, the bouncer ID checking protein, right?
Yeah.
That you go, like, you go in up to a club or something and they ask for your ID. So basically you go to it and you have to pull out your ID and you have to prove that you are you. And effectively, this is how all immune cells don't kill you. They every time they touch a cell, they're like, all right, show me your ID. And the ID in this scenario is basically it forces the cell to spit out something and be like, here are some of my things that I have inside of me.
Yeah.
And the immune cell goes, that makes sense, and then moves on, right? So effectively, that's the idea. And it does this to all cells. This is commonplace in the immune system. And this is how they also spot a disease-causing thing, where they'll do this to a disease-causing thing and it'll be like, oh, I shouldn't do this, and it forces it open. It spits out some things that really shouldn't be in the human body, and it goes, all right, bud, you're done. You're out.
You're done.
We're throwing you out. You're not allowed in here anymore. And what they found was this particular immune cell had a lot of this receptor protein on its outside, and it was using this protein to interact with the cancer cells. The cancer cells would spit out a load of its innards, and the immune cell would figure out that this is not a healthy cell and we need to destroy it. Mm-hmm. Whilst when it went to a healthy cell and it spat out its innards, it was like, yeah, this is fine, this is normal.
You're allowed in.
But there's still a big scientific question left here, where what is it that the T cell is spotting that makes it know the difference between a cancerous cell and a non-cancerous cell. And that is still a question on the horizon, because they've figured out that, right, the cancerous cell is spitting something out that makes it easily identifiable as a cancer cell to these immune cells.
Mm-hmm.
But we have no idea what it is. So what if we could figure out what it was spotting and then make something specific for that?
Wow.
Yeah, so that's
really promising.
It is. It's a really, really thing. It's it's really, really exciting. It's coming from the UK, and it's a really, really cool and promising thing coming out. And yeah, I think that's, in my opinion, that's the most exciting all-round cure out there, even though it won't cure everything, but it'll be a huge leap, we'll say, towards that.
Yeah, and that's really all we need is a leap after leap after leap.
Exactly.
Scrounge break.
Are you over 18 and looking for someone to procreate with? Well, go type P in your search bar and do your thing there, and then come back to us for a good storyline. Go to patreon.com/livingroomlogic to support us and get merch and other exclusive bits. Mwah.
Actually, another leap that I want to talk about is, and it's kind of looking at the whole thing from a different perspective, looking at cancer from more of maybe evolutionary or ecological perspective, okay? Yeah. And me being an ecologist, of course, I'm going to do
Shocking.
that. But I thought it was quite cool that it wasn't just me who would want to do something like that. Actually, other people did as well. But just talking about the future of cancer in general, the real future of cancer is that we're gonna have to learn how to live with it for now anyway, because it's unfortunately a consequence or a side effect of multicellular life. And let me explain this, because it does sound a bit mad, but think about it this way, okay? So as Andrew said, cancer isn't a new thing in humans, but cancer actually is around in lots of other organisms as well, okay? Potentially for billions of years. And yeah, so we think that every single multicellular organism has the potential to develop a cancer, and scientists have even found dinosaur bones that are 75 million years old that have malignant tumors in them, which is just amazing. And so researchers today, as I said, are thinking about cancer in this more ecological or evolutionary light, where instead of curing a cancer, they want to control a cancer's evolution by slowly whittling away its genetic diversity, and then ultimately driving the cancer to what they want to call a local extinction event, okay? So we're trying to think about all of this from an evolutionary point of view, okay? Let me give you an example of this from the animal kingdom, okay? Just so it might make a little bit more sense. So you might know this, but for hundreds of thousands of years in Australia, there was this weird marsupial predator that resembled a wild dog, and it was known as the Thylacine Wolf. Did you know this, Andrew?
I absolutely did not. Please inform me.
Yeah, so it's really cool. This marsupial wolf was doing great in Australia for hundreds of thousands of years, right up until the British Empire colonized the continent in the early 1800s. Well done, lads. The British colonizers basically slowly pushed the distribution of the species further inland. They killed most of them because they're a predator, and they would kill livestock and stuff. On top of this, though, the introduction of these agricultural animals brought new pests into the country, and these brought new diseases that also infected the marsupial wolves, okay? And on top of that, the introduction of dingoes and domesticated dogs also put pressure on the marsupial wolves in the form of competition for food and territory. So all these stressors working at different times over a long period, and for the case of the Thylacine wolf, it was over a century. It drove them to extinction in 1936. So there's actually photographs of this dog. If you look it up on Google, it looks crazy. They called it the Thylacine tiger or something like that, the Aussie tiger. It has stripes on its back, and it evolved completely differently from canine dogs. But because that niche needs close to the ground, 4 legs and big teeth, it also evolved that. But it's very cool, and so the moral of this story though is that, and because I know I kind of went off on my fun ecology evolution.
Look, you're happy.
This is
We're
what I
all
love.
happy when you're happy.
Yeah, but how this is relevant is that an extinction event takes time. Okay, a lot of time, and there has to be several things slowly pushing a population or a species into an evolutionary corner, okay, where genetic diversity is really low.
Yes.
And as the genetic diversity is ultimately the fuel of evolution, when a few final blows are thrown at this cornered population that has the low genetic diversity, this is when the rate of mutation is too low to evolve the traits to survive, and finally extinction happens. Okay, so this whole concept is actually being used by a cancer research team led by a dude called Dr. Robert Gattenby, okay, in Florida.
Very cool.
In a place called the Moffitt Cancer Center, okay?
Wow.
So what his team are doing is they're basically using complicated mathematics to model the evolutionary directions that cancers might make under different treatment regimes, okay? But using this more kind of ecological or evolutionary strategy, his team are trying to generate low genetic diversity in patients' cancers, with the hope of eventually bringing the cancers to what we called the local extinction events within each patient. Okay? Yeah. So the types of treatments involve similar drugs to modern cancer treatments, but they're using the evolution-based models to decide treatment doses. So using less potency and more of a variety of treatments over longer periods of time.
Interesting.
To not just, so they don't want to just blast the cancer in strong but short-lived bursts, as kind of is typically the case in modern medicine in most cancer treatments, but to slowly direct the cancer towards a path of lower malignancy and ultimately prolong the lifespan and quality of life of the person with cancer.
Wow,
okay,
that's interesting.
And so it is really cool, and the results are actually really promising because this guy's research team in Florida have several long-term clinical trials ongoing on cancer patients who had a life expectancy of about, I think it was like 18 months is what they were given with their malignant cancers. They are now surviving for 5 years or more on this new treatment. Yeah. Wow. So this seems to be working.
Wow.
And it is picking up a lot of steam. Like, they're doing very well in their research. So this is one of the future ways we may be able to deal with cancer, not by curing it from the world, but by like controlling it to a point where people can live with their cancers for years, maybe even like decades. And the way they explain it is that they want people, and this sounds a bit weird, but they want people to die from something else other than their cancer.
Yeah.
They want it to be in 20, 25 years' time, someone who was 70 was killed by a really bad flu in a bad winter or something like that. Something that a normal 95-year-old person passes away from, okay? And this is the reality because another really good analogy they have is with HIV, and that people nowadays, the treatment for HIV and full-blown AIDS is so good that people are not dying from their AIDS disease. They're dying from other things at old age, and they're having a wonderful quality of life, or at least a much better quality of life than they would have ever thought maybe 20, 30 years ago. So this is really the kind of future of cancer treatment. So aside from altering the way we approach cancer treatment, other ways we're going to live with cancer in the future is by increasing the effort we put into preventing exposure to cancer risk factors, okay? And by upping the ante in screening for certain cancers. Because, it turns out that we know the source or origin of about 50% of all cancers that a person may get. About 10% of all of these cancers can be traced back to a genetic predisposition for a certain type or group of cancer types. And an example I saw was it's known as the BRCA gene, and you can actually look in someone's genome for this section of their genome called the BRCA gene. And that's actually an indicator that they have a much higher chance of developing breast cancer in their lifetimes, okay? but unfortunately we don't really know how to prevent people that are genetically predisposed to certain cancers from getting them.
Yeah.
But people with these genes can be monitored closely, basically, to make sure if a cancer arises in their lifetime, so it can be caught and treated early, and this will increase that person's survival rate massively,
Yeah, man.
And so the other 40% of cancers that are that we know the causes to are caused by external stressors, and so we actually can avoid this other 40% of cancers. We can try and avoid these risk factors. And so the kind of first group is actually a couple pathogens that can lead to or make someone more susceptible to certain cancers. So one is the human papilloma virus, or HPV. And so that can actually cause cervical cancer in women. So there's an amazing screening system going on in Ireland right now for HPV, and people are getting HPV vaccines at a very young age, and that is really improving the amount of people who are developing. It's really reducing the amount of people who are developing HPV. And then the other major one is actually hepatitis B as well. So I actually don't know which cancers hepatitis B can make people more susceptible to getting. That is another one that the WHO have basically said this is something you can get a vaccine for, and then you're sound, like you're not on that risk group anymore, And then the other things that cause cancer are what we mentioned earlier on, carcinogens, and there's a couple different behavioral risks as well. So, everyone probably knows this already, but tobacco causes about 20% of all cancers.
Yep.
And so the more people get this information put in front of them, the more people will stop consuming tobacco. And it's not even to stop it. If you love it, you love it. But just know that this is the highest risk factor for developing cancer, other than those pathogens, which is mental for these 40% of all cancers. Yep. So other things that you might know or might not is actually like processed meats are actually a large risk factor for cancers. Another thing is alcohol, which people probably know a bit better. The sun, UV radiation. People know this. Like, people know that if you get sunburnt too many times or whatever, that this will give you cancer. So again, this is really good that most people know that. And things like ionizing radiation, like getting an X-ray, or it's mostly for people who are in jobs that are to do with using these types of scans and stuff, that they have to go behind really big LED screens and stuff. People who work in those X-ray machines, they are well protected. What's really cool about all this is all this information is actually supported by an absolute mountain of evidence in a body of work called the European Code on Cancer. This is made by the Cancer Research Branch in the World Health Organization. So it's incredible. And if you actually just want to go in, there's it's really easy to read, and they give guides on exactly what you need to do to prevent yourself from being in these risk factor groups for those 40% of cancers, which is amazing. So go and get that information into you and get informed about it, because that really is what we need right now. Is we need people to just get this information, that we know so much about these 40%. But this is something that I don't have an answer for, but the big elephant in the room is the other 50% of all cancers that we really don't actually know yet what is causing them. This is the future. The future is trying to figure out, what are these other cancers caused by? Is there things that we can do to prevent them? Or are there more genetic people? Are there more cancers in that category that are just due to genetics? Or is it just because of this, as we said, with time we age and our cells get worse and worse at dividing and bringing that genetic code book onto the next generation of cells, and they just make mistakes as you get older and older.
For sure. It's really, really interesting. It's a really, really interesting topic. It is important for people to be informed and the lovely listener, very good looking today, may I say, is certainly very informed about this now after having listened to us. It's a lot, but there's a lot of good in there. Like, there's a lot of positive, and the way these things work, I'd say the cancer treatment in a decade will be vastly different to how it was today, or especially 10 years ago.
To think that you said about the radiation therapy that was like they made x-rays and then they made radiation therapy like 3 months later. That's incredible.
Literally 3 years later. Completely crazy. Like but that's it. Physicians want to do these things. They want it to be safe. And surely it will be. And there's, like, we have gone through so many different treatments for cancer today. Like, we haven't even been able to mention them all. No. Like, we're not even close. Like, there's the, like, Pimp My Ride giving your cancer treatment, where essentially they put a cancer on your cancer, which is way more aggressive and sucks all of the nutrients out of the original cancer, and then they just treat the one that they put in, and that's crazy. That's called it's like a Digimon evolution. You know, it's like a cancer evolved into
I know. So there's
it's crazy.
So there's so many different perspectives here. People are coming at cancer from every which way to try and figure this out. But I really think that we're never going to get rid of it completely.
No.
But that it will become a thing, hopefully, in the future that we can just live with. Yeah. You know, you might be 80 or 90 and you will have cancer, but it's not going to be the thing that kills you. It's actually not even going to really affect your quality of life too much. And so that's where we want to be. Yeah.
It's good. I think it's great. I think not cancer, the treatment and the development and all of these things, obviously. But I
have a lot of hope too.
Anyways, on that note, have a lovely week. We hope you got some more positive vibes than you expected off of this podcast episode.
Take care, everyone. Well, I don't even know. I was just doing like spread the good stuff there.
I know. Yeah. No, that's over. And hopefully at this point, so is the pandemic. All right.
Love it. Love it. This is the end of the podcast. We hope you enjoyed your time. If you're feeling generous and you're not completely skinned, why don't you give us some of your money? Join our Patreon. Join our Patreon. Join our Patreon. Join our Patreon.